The Voth's cruel laughter echoed through the corridor as they mocked Philip's puny pistol, an ancient human relic from a bygone era. Little did those arrogant aliens know, in mere moments their energy shields would fail, and their scaly hides would be riddled with armor-shredding slugs from that primitive gun. It was the year 2347. Humanity had spread across the stars, encountering a plethora of alien races. Some were friendly, others indifferent. And then there were the Voth, a warlike reptilian species locked in a bitter cold war with Earth for decades. Tensions were at a breaking point. As a last-ditch effort to avoid all-out galactic conflict, human diplomats were dispatched to the Voth homeworld under the protection of Philip Miller and his squad of battle-hardened space marines. Philip was no stranger to the Voth. He had gone toe-to-toe with their kind before, barely emerging victorious. Now, as an aging veteran on the brink of retirement, he found himself saddled with one last mission: babysitting a bunch of soft-bellied diplomats and preventing the outbreak of interstellar war. The human ship glided through the void toward the alien planet, its crew hopeful yet on edge. Without warning, a massive Voth warship materialized from the black, weapons blazing. The human vessel shuddered under the onslaught, its defenses stripped away. In a matter of moments, the ship was crippled, alarms wailing and fires raging. Voth shock troopers smashed through the airlock, storming inside with vicious glee. The outmatched human security personnel fell swiftly under the aliens' brutal assault. Screams and blood filled the air. Philip rallied his men for a final stand as they covered the diplomats' desperate retreat. And there, in that smoke-choked corridor, Philip and his Marines found themselves surrounded and hopelessly outnumbered. The Voth advanced with sadistic smiles, relishing the humans' despair, their hisses of laughter cruel and mocking. Behind Philip, the diplomats cowered, their last shreds of hope evaporating. Philip reached slowly under his jacket and removed an ancient pistol, an M1911 from the early days of human warfare. The Voth saw the crude gun and erupted in mocking hilarity, their leader Mizar's rasping guffaws loudest of all. They knew their advanced personal energy shields could deflect any primitive projectile with contemptuous ease. But Philip just smiled grimly. He had inherited this rugged weapon from his great-great-grandfather, an American soldier. The pistol had been passed down through generations of Philip's family, seeing action in countless bloody conflicts. He knew something the Voth didn't. Philip thumbed back the hammer and took careful aim at the closest alien as his fellow Marines braced to attack. The Voth's laughter echoed through the corridor as they all prepared to gun down the pitiful humans. And in that pivotal moment, Philip Miller made a decision that would alter the fate of the galaxy. A decision that would teach the Voth to fear the tenacity and ingenuity of the human spirit. A decision that would reignite a war and change the path of history. Philip pulled the trigger. Ancient human gunpowder exploded within that slim metal barrel, and the universe itself seemed to hold its breath. Time seemed to crawl as the first slug tore through the air, its copper jacket glinting in the harsh light. The Voth's laughter died in their throats as the projectile found its mark, punching clean through the alien's energy shield and burying itself deep in scaly flesh. The stricken Voth crumpled to the deck, shock and disbelief etched on his reptilian features. Mizar's eyes widened in horrified realization. He barked orders to his troops, but it was too late. The humans opened fire, the antiquated pistols roaring to life. The Voth's shields sparkled uselessly as the hail of lead ripped through them, felling the aliens like wheat before a scythe. In a matter of seconds, it was over. The once smug Voth lay in twisted heaps, their lifeblood pooling on the deck. Philip stood amidst the carnage, his smoking M1911 still clutched in his hand. He turned to his fellow Marines, a fierce grin splitting his face. "Let's get these diplomats to the escape pods. We're getting off this tub." The group raced through the ship's corridors, alarms blaring and flames licking at their heels. They piled into the waiting pods just as the crippled vessel shuddered its last. The pods blasted free, spinning away into the darkness as the ship erupted in a blinding fireball behind them. Adrift in the silent void, Philip stared out the pod's viewport, his mind racing. He turned the ancient weapon over in his hands, marveling at its deadly simplicity. If this relic could defeat the Voth's vaunted technology, what other secrets might humanity's past hold? He thumbed the beacon controls, sending out a distress call on all frequencies. Now, they could only wait and hope. Hours crawled by in the cramped confines of the pod. Just as despair began to set in, a flicker of movement caught Philip's eye. A human recon ship, sleek and angular, slid into view, its running lights blinking a welcome pattern. The pod shook as the larger vessel latched on, and a hiss of equalizing pressure sounded as the airlock cycled open. Philip and the diplomats stumbled out, blinking in the sudden brightness. The ship's captain, a grizzled veteran, strode forward to greet them, relief and curiosity warring on his craggy features. "Commander Miller, I presume? Damn good to see you alive. We intercepted a distress call, and what the hell happened out there?" Philip held up the M1911, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Captain, have I got a story for you?" As the recon ship sped back to Earth, urgent communiques flew between the vessel and Solcom HQ. The brass wasted no time bringing Philip in for debriefing upon his return. He found himself whisked away to a black site research station on some far-flung moon, the base's existence stricken from all records. There, Philip watched as the brightest minds in the Solar Federation pored over his ancestral pistol, subjecting it to every analysis imaginable. He leaned against the wall of the lab, arms crossed. Dr. Samesh, the project lead, looked up from her workstation, eyes shining with excitement. "Commander Miller, this is incredible. The Voth shields are specifically calibrated to repel energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles. But these slow-moving kinetic rounds slip right through. It's so elegant in its simplicity. We can work with this." As the days stretched into weeks, the base became a hive of activity. Fabricators hummed day and night, churning out updated versions of the ancient weapon. The new rifles and pistols married modern materials and manufacturing with the brute simplicity of chemical propellant and solid slugs. Philip ran drills with the newly formed Terran Irregular Tactics Squadron, putting the fresh-forged weapons through their paces. The crack team of operators moved like a well-oiled machine, their motions fluid and precise. Mere days later, news reached the research station of a massive Voth offensive. The alien juggernauts had launched a blitzkrieg assault on the colony of New Macau, their dropships darkening the skies. The Solcom general's face was grim as it flickered over the view screen. "Commander Miller, your team is the tip of the spear. We're dropping you right into the thick of it. Show those scaly bastards what happens when they pick a fight with the human race." The TITS operators boarded their stealth insertion craft, the new weapons cold and ready in their hands. As the ship screamed through the atmosphere, AA fire blazing around them, Philip triple-checked his rifle, the descendant of his trusty M1911. The time for subtlety was over. This was war. The landing was hot, Voth pulse fire stitching the air as Philip and his team piled out into the maelstrom. All around them, the colony burned, its defenders fighting desperately against the alien onslaught. Philip sighted down his rifle's barrel, its smart linked scope feeding targeting data to his HUD. He exhaled slowly, then squeezed the trigger. The weapon bucked in his hands, the fat subsonic round spiraling out to punch through the lead Voth's shield and helmet like cheap plastic. All along the line, human forces rallied, the Irregulars' success galvanizing the beleaguered defenders. The Voth suddenly found themselves on the back foot, their greatest technological advantage turned against them. Philip ducked and rolled as a plasma bolt sizzled past his ear, coming up in a crouch to put a round clean through his attacker's faceplate. "Pour it on, boys. Their shields ain't worth shit." The Tiets pushed forward, a spearhead plunging into the enemy's heart. Voth warriors fell by the dozens, their energy shields worse than useless against the human onslaught. The aliens broke and ran, shocked by the sudden turning of tables. When the smoke cleared and the shooting stopped, Philip and his team stood victorious atop a small mountain of Voth dead. The operators looked to each other, exhausted grins plastered across their soot-streaked faces. They had done the impossible. They had beaten back humanity's greatest foe. In the following days, stories of the ragtag company's stand at New Macau spread like wildfire throughout the colonies. The Terran Irregular Tactics Squadron became living legends, their exploits lighting a spark of hope in the downtrodden. But Mizar had escaped the rout, and his cruiser limped back to Voth space, its crew shamed and bloodied. The warlord slammed a fist into his command chair as he watched footage of his warrior's ignominious defeat. His eyes narrowed to slits as an idea took hold, cold and sharp. If the primitive apes wanted to play dirty, then he would show them the folly of their ways. Mizar would teach the humans to curse the day they dared cross the Voth Empire. Meanwhile, in the halls of Voth High Command, the Archon seethed with rage as reports of the disastrous campaign filtered in. His very throne room shook with the fury of his bellows. Unacceptable. I will not allow the upstart Terrans to make a mockery of us. The assembled generals cringed back, knowing full well the price of failure. The Archon gestured to the strategic holomap floating before him, the myriad worlds of the Orion Spur glittering in the air. We will crush the humans and their pathetic coalition, grind them to dust beneath our boots. Summon the battle fleets, marshal every warrior under our banner. This will be a reckoning unparalleled in the annals of history. As the Archon's orders rippled through Voth space, 1,000 ships of the line gathered, their hulls jam-packed with weapons and troops. At the head of this assembled juggernaut hung Mizar's battered cruiser, the warlord's eyes gleaming with malice. Across the gulf of space, Solcom listened with mounting dread as panicked communiques flooded in from the far-flung monitoring posts. A Voth armada was on the move, and its course was clear, a straight line for the shining blue jewel of Earth. In a shadowed wardroom, Earth's leaders conferred in hushed, harried tones. They had played their trump card at New Macau, and now the enemy was at the gates, baying for blood. A scarred general stepped forward, his fingers trembling as they clutched a data slate. Lords and ladies, we cannot hope to match the Voth force for force. Our fleets are scattered, our armies battered. We need a miracle. Silence descended, heavy and oppressive. Eyes downcast, the leaders racked their brains for some solution, some last-ditch gambit. Then, from the back of the room, a voice rang out, clear and strong. Sirs, I believe I have a plan. Heads swiveled to regard the speaker. He stood tall and proud, his heart made. The general squinted at the man's uniform, noting the insignia upon his breast. Commander Miller, I pray to every god there is that you're right. Commander Miller's plan was as audacious as it was desperate. We're going to sneak aboard Mizar's flagship and blow it to hell, he told his hand-picked squad. Any questions? The grim-faced soldiers exchanged glances, then shook their heads. They knew the stakes. Miller hefted one of the new rifles reverse-engineered from his old M1911. These babies will punch right through their shields. Don't waste ammo. Make every shot count. The team crammed into a captured Voth supply ship, nestled among crates of alien rations and spare parts. As they approached the massive flagship, Miller's heart pounded. One slip-up, and they'd be vaporized before they could even fight back. But luck was with them. The Voth were too focused on their impending assault on Earth to give the routine supply delivery more than a cursory scan. Before Miller knew it, they were inside the cavernous docking bay. Move fast, stay low, he whispered as they slipped out of the ship. The alien vessel's corridors twisted like a maze, but Miller had studied the layout for days. They encountered their first patrol at a junction, 4 Voth warriors who never saw it coming. The humans' new weapons made short work of them. Damn, Private Rodriguez breathed, staring at the fallen aliens. These guns really work. They pressed on, dispatching 2 more patrols before reaching the ship's central core. The massive reactor thrummed with barely contained energy. Plant the charges, Miller ordered. We'll overload this sucker and... A hissing laugh cut him off. Miller spun to see Mizar step out of the shadows, flanked by a squad of elite guards. Did you really think it would be so easy, human? The Voth warlord sneered. Miller opened fire, but his bullet splashed harmlessly off a shimmering energy field surrounding Mizar. "I've learned from our last encounter," Mizar gloated. "Your primitive weapons are useless now." The two sides clashed in furious combat. Miller's team fought bravely, but the Voth's superior strength and armor began to tell. One by one, his soldiers fell. Miller found himself locked in a desperate struggle with Mizar. The alien's claws raked across his chest, drawing blood. Miller stumbled back, his rifle knocked away. "Your species will be exterminated," Mizar hissed, "and I will savor every moment of it." But even as they fought, Miller's surviving team members worked frantically to sabotage the reactor. Warning klaxons began to blare. "Commander!" Sergeant Chen shouted. "It's gonna blow! We need to go now!" Miller's mind raced. There had to be a weakness in Mizar's new shield. Then it hit him. The power source. It had to be calibrated specifically against their weapons. He drew his sidearm, the old M1911 that had started it all. Before Mizar could react, Miller fired point blank at the small generator on the alien's belt. The antique bullet ripped through the unshielded device. Mizar howled in pain and fury as his protective field flickered and died. "Fall back!" Miller roared to his team. "Get to the escape pods!" They ran through corridors that shook with the reactor's death throes. Miller's lungs burned as he sprinted after his men, Mizar's enraged bellows echoing behind them. They piled into a Voth escape pod just as the first explosions rocked the ship. Miller slammed the launch controls and they blasted free of the doomed vessel. Through the pod's viewport, they watched Mizar's flagship tear itself apart in a spectacular fireball. The shockwave buffeted their tiny craft, nearly sending them tumbling end over end. "We did it," Chen said in awe. "We actually did it." But their elation was short-lived. As a human cruiser moved to retrieve them, they received a chilling transmission. "Commander Miller," came the grim voice of Admiral Zhao. "The Voth energy cannon was a feint. We've detected a cloaked object in Earth orbit, some kind of doomsday weapon. It's primed to release a virus that will wipe out humanity." Miller's blood ran cold. He thought of the countless lives at stake, of everything they'd sacrificed to get this far. "I'll go," he said without hesitation. "One last mission, whatever it takes." As they docked with the human ship and Miller prepared for this final risky move, a chill ran down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, against impossible odds, Mizar had survived. And if he had... Miller pushed the thought aside. He had a job to do. The fate of Earth itself hung in the balance. Miller gripped the controls of the captured Voth shuttle, his squeezing hard as they slipped past the alien armada. The doomsday device loomed ahead, a massive construct of alien metal that threatened all of humanity. 30 seconds to contact, Sergeant Chen whispered from the co-pilot's seat. Miller nodded grimly. "Remember, people, we're the only thing standing between Earth and extinction. Make every shot count." The shuttle touched down silently in a deserted docking bay. Miller's team poured out, weapons at the ready. The familiar weight of his M1911 was a comfort at his hip. They encountered the first Voth patrol at a junction. Miller's new rifle barked twice, and 2 aliens dropped. The rest of his squad opened up, their rounds punching through energy shields like they weren't even there. "Push forward!" Miller shouted as alarms began to blare. They fought their way through twisting corridors, the chatter of gunfire echoing off alien walls. Miller lost track of how many Voth fell before his weapon. Then, as they rounded a corner, a massive figure stepped into view. Mizar. "Impossible," Miller breathed. The Voth warlord's scales were charred, but his eyes blazed with hate. He lashed out with inhuman speed, his claws raking across Private Johnson's throat before anyone could react. "Take cover!" Miller roared as Mizar charged. The squad scattered, pouring fire into the advancing alien, but Mizar shrugged off their shots, his personal shield flickering with each impact. He caught Corporal Santos in a vice-like grip, snapping the man's spine with a sickening crunch. Miller's mind raced. They needed to reach the control core, but Mizar was between them and their goal. He made a snap decision. "Chen, Take half the squad and push for the objective. We'll keep this bastard busy. Chen nodded and peeled off with 3 Marines. Mizar snarled and moved to pursue, but Miller stepped into his path, firing his pistol point blank. The antique weapon's rounds slipped past the alien's defenses, drawing ichor. Mizar howled in pain and fury, focusing his rage on Miller. The two traded blows in a brutal dance, neither willing to give ground. Miller's ribs cracked under a thunderous impact, but he gritted his teeth and fought on. Finally, Miller saw his opening. As Mizar lunged, the commander ducked under his guard and jammed his pistol against a small device on the alien's belt. He squeezed the trigger, and Mizar's shield generator exploded in a shower of sparks. The Voth warlord stumbled back, stunned. Miller didn't hesitate. He slammed the butt of his rifle into Mizar's face, sending the alien crashing to the deck. "Commander!" Chen's voice crackled over the radio. "We've rigged the core. 2 minutes to detonation." Miller turned to run, but a clawed hand wrapped around his ankle. Mizar, somehow still conscious, dragged him down. "If I die," the alien hissed, "you die with me." They grappled on the floor, trading savage blows. Miller's vision swam, his lungs burning for air as Mizar's grip tightened around his throat. With the last of his strength, Miller brought up his pistol and fired. The bullet caught Mizar under the chin, punching through alien flesh and bone. The Voth's eyes went wide, then blank. Miller staggered to his feet, his whole body screaming in protest. He sprinted for the shuttle bay, scooping up fallen comrades as he went. The doomsday device shuddered around them as Miller's team piled into their stolen craft. Chen gunned the engines, and they blasted free of the dying superweapon. As they hurtled towards Earth, Miller watched chunks of debris streak past. His heart sank as he realized the destruction they'd wrought to save humanity. He keyed the emergency frick. "This is Commander Miller to Solcom. Doomsday device neutralized, but we've got debris incoming. Brace for impact." The shuttle streaked through Earth's atmosphere, Miller's grip white-knuckled on the controls as he fought for a safe landing. All the while, his mind raced. How many Voth had survived? And what would be their next move? The shuttle crashed hard onto Earth's surface, jolting Commander Miller awake. He stumbled out onto scorched ground, eyes widening at the devastation around him. The sky burned orange, choked with debris. In the distance, a city lay in ruins, its skyline shattered. "My God," Miller breathed, surveying the apocalyptic landscape. His comm unit crackled to life. "Commander Miller, report to Solcom immediately." Hours later, Miller stood before a battered group of military leaders in an underground bunker. Admiral Zhao's face was grim as he spoke. "The Voth doomsday device is neutralized, but at a terrible cost. Millions dead, infrastructure decimated, and now we've detected Voth stragglers regrouping." Miller's fists clenched. "What do you need me to do, sir?" "Hunt them down. Finish this once and for all." Miller nodded, his mind already assembling a team. He'd need the best of the best for this. 2 days later, Miller addressed his hand-picked squad. Chen, Rodriguez, and other survivors from his previous missions stood at attention. "This won't be easy," Miller said. "We're tracking a Voth command ship that went down in Russia. The area's hot, radiation, mutants, the works. But if we don't stop them now, Earth's finished. Any questions?" Silence. They all knew the stakes. The team's armored dropship cut through irradiated storm clouds, touching down in a desolate wasteland. As they disembarked, Geiger counters clicked ominously. "Masks on," Miller ordered. "Stay alert." They trekked for days through the blasted landscape. Twisted metal and bones littered the ground. Mutated creatures scuttled in the shadows. On the 4th day, Chen spotted it, the crashed Voth ship, a jagged wound in the earth. "Move in, quiet," Miller whispered. They crept forward, weapons ready. Miller's instincts screamed danger. Suddenly the ground erupted. Voth shock troops poured from hidden bunkers, energy weapons blazing. "Contact!" Miller shouted, diving for cover. The air filled with plasma bolts and human gunfire. Miller's team fought viciously, their new weapons punching through Voth defenses. For a moment, it seemed they might prevail. Then a massive figure emerged from the wrecked ship. "Impossible," Miller gasped. Mizar stood before them, his body a nightmarish fusion of alien flesh and machinery. Glowing cybernetic implants pulsed along his scales. The Voth warlord's augmented voice boomed across the battlefield. "Did you think me so easy to kill, human?" Mizar's arm transformed, unfurling into a plasma cannon. He unleashed a torrent of energy, vaporizing 2 of Miller's soldiers instantly. Miller's mind raced. How had Mizar survived? How could they possibly win? He raised his rifle and charged, screaming defiance. Mizar met him head-on, cybernetic claws slashing. They traded blows in a deadly dance. Miller's bullets pinged harmlessly off Mizar's reinforced hide. The alien strikes left deep gashes in Miller's armor. More Voth poured from underground shelters, overwhelming Miller's dwindling team. He heard Rodriguez cry out in pain, saw Chen fall under a wave of attackers. Bleeding and battered, Miller's back slammed against a piece of wreckage. Mizar loomed over him, victorious. "Your species ends here," the Voth warlord hissed. Miller's hand brushed something in the debris, a power coupling from the crashed ship. His eyes darted to Mizar's cybernetic implants, an insane plan forming. He had one shot at this, one last daring plan. Miller's hand closed around the power coupling, his muscles tensing for action. Mizar loomed over him, cybernetic implants pulsing with alien energy. The commander's mind raced, calculating angles and trajectories. "Chen, Rodriguez, converge fire on the ship's reactor core," Miller barked into his comm. His remaining squad members reacted instantly, shifting their aim. Their weapons spat a hail of bullets at the exposed reactor housing. Voth troops scrambled for cover as sparks and debris rained down. Miller seized his moment. He launched himself at Mizar, jamming the power coupling against an exposed cybernetic port. Electricity arced between them. The Voth warlord howled, his systems momentarily overloaded. "Move, move!" Miller shouted, sprinting for the reactor chamber. Plasma bolts sizzled past his head. He dove, rolled, and came up running. A Voth soldier lunged at him. Miller's fist connected with an alien jaw, and he kept moving. Behind him, Mizar recovered. The warlord's arm reconfigured, forming a devastating energy cannon. He unleashed a barrage that vaporized 2 human soldiers instantly. Miller's lungs burned as he reached the reactor chamber. He slammed the door controls, buying precious seconds. His fingers flew over the reactor console, initiating an overload sequence. "All units, fall back," he ordered. "I'm rigging this thing to blow." Outside, the battle raged. Chen and Rodriguez coordinated a fighting retreat, their weapons blazing. Voth reinforcements poured from underground bunkers, threatening to overwhelm them. Miller worked frantically, attaching his last explosive charges to critical junctures. The reactor core pulsed with unstable energy. A thunderous impact shook the chamber. Mizar, trying to break through. "Commander," Chen's voice crackled over the comm, "we can't hold them much longer." Miller finished the final connection. The countdown timer blinked to life. He keyed his radio one last time. "Get clear now, that's an order." The door burst inward. Mizar stormed through, his cybernetic body crackling with fury. Miller raised his antique pistol, squeezing off 3 rounds in rapid succession. The bullets punched through weakened shielding, striking vital implants. Mizar staggered, systems shorting out. Miller didn't hesitate. He charged, tackling the Voth warlord. They grappled on the chamber floor, trading vicious blows. Outside, Chen rallied the survivors. They fired and fell back, each step taking them further from the doomed ship. Voth plasma bolts scorched the earth around them. In the reactor chamber, Miller's fist connected with Mizar's jaw. The alien's cybernetic claws raked across his chest. Blood and sweat mingled as they fought. The countdown reached 0. A blinding flash consumed the chamber. The reactor core detonated, unleashing a cataclysmic shockwave. It rippled outward, vaporizing Voth soldiers and human marines alike. Chen and the few remaining squad members sprinted for their lives. The blast wave nipped at their heels, hurling them forward. They tumbled across the scorched earth, ears ringing, vision blurred. Slowly, agonizingly, they picked themselves up. Where the Voth ship had stood, only a smoking crater remained. "The commander," Rodriguez whispered, his voice hoarse. Chen shook his head, fighting back tears. He knew the cost. Let's get to the extraction point. The battered survivors limped across the wasteland. Each step was a struggle, but they pressed on. For Earth, for Miller. Hours later, they reached the extraction zone. As Chen began his grim report to command, a figure emerged from the shadows. Bloody, battered, but unmistakably alive, Commander Philip Miller stood before them. "How?" Chen gasped. Miller managed a weary smile. Reactor shielding. Tough stuff. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing his battered M1911. The pistol that had started it all now lay inert in his palm. "It's over," Miller said softly. "We did it." As medical teams rushed to attend the survivors, Miller's gaze turned to the horizon. The battle was won, but Earth lay in ruins. There would be time to mourn, to rebuild, and to ensure humanity was ready for whatever threat came next. The acrid stench of ozone and alien biomatter filled Miller's nostrils as he led his team through the twisting corridors of the Voth facility. Sweat trickled down his face, stinging his eyes as he squinted through the eerie blue glow of emergency lighting. "Chen, Rodriguez, watch our six," Miller barked, his voice tight with tension. The squad moved in practiced formation, weapons at the ready. Their boots clanked against the metal grating underfoot, each step echoing ominously in the vast chamber. Suddenly, a piercing alarm shattered the silence. Red warning lights bathed the corridor in a hellish glow. "They know we're here," Rodriguez hissed, his finger tightening on the trigger of his pulse rifle. Miller's eyes sharp as he surveyed the scene before them. Rows upon rows of incubation pods stretched into the darkness, each containing a half-formed abomination, a twisted fusion of Voth and human DNA. "My God," Chen whispered, his face pale beneath his helmet. "What has Mizar done?" Before Miller could respond, the nearest pod hissed open. A partially formed cyborg prototype lurched out, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. Its flesh was a patchwork of scales and skin, with glowing cybernetic implants pulsing beneath the surface. "Take it down!" Miller shouted, raising his antique M1911. The squad opened fire, their rounds punching through the creature's unfinished shielding. It collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs and sparking circuitry. But more pods were opening, dozens, hundreds. "Push forward," Miller ordered, his voice rising above the cacophony of alarms and gunfire. "We have to reach that control room." They fought their way through wave after wave of half-formed monstrosities. Miller's pistol barked again and again, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. Chen and Rodriguez unleashed salvos from their pulse rifles, the advanced weapons proving devastatingly effective against the prototype cyborgs. As they neared the control room, the resistance intensified. Fully formed Voth warriors joined the fray, their energy weapons filling the air with sizzling plasma bolts. Miller ducked behind a fallen incubation pod, feeling the heat of a near-miss plasma bolt singe his hair. He popped up, squeezing off 2 quick shots that dropped a Voth soldier in its tracks. "Commander!" Chen shouted over the din of battle. "The door!" Miller's eyes locked onto their objective, the massive blast doors of the central control room. They were so close, yet the sea of enemies between them seemed insurmountable. "Covering fire!" Miller roared, breaking from cover in a dead sprint. His team laid down a blistering barrage, their weapons chewing through Voth and cyborg alike. Miller's lungs burned as he ran, his legs pumping furiously. Plasma bolts screamed past him, close enough that he could feel their heat on his skin. He reached the door controls, his fingers flying over the alien interface. The massive doors began to slide open with agonizing slowness. "Fall back to me," Miller shouted to his team. "We're almost—" His words died in his throat as the doors fully opened. There, framed in the entrance, stood a nightmarish figure. Mizar loomed before them, his body a terrifying fusion of Voth biology and cutting-edge cybernetics. Glowing implants pulsed beneath his scales and his arm reconfigured into a devastating energy weapon. "Miller!" The Voth warlord's augmented voice boomed, filled with cold fury. "You should have stayed dead." Miller raised his pistol, staring down the barrel at his old nemesis. His finger tightened on the trigger as Mizar's weapon began to glow with building energy. Energy. Miller's finger tightened on the trigger, his antique M1911 bucking in his hand. The bullet struck Mizar's cybernetic chest plate, ricocheting harmlessly away. The Voth warlord's arm cannon unleashed a devastating barrage. Searing bolts of energy tore through the air. Private Johnson screamed as he was vaporized instantly. Sergeant Lee's chest exploded in a spray of gore. "Take cover!" Miller shouted, diving behind a control console. Chen and Rodriguez scrambled for shelter, their pulse rifles spitting ineffectually against Mizar's enhanced defenses. The alien warlord strode forward, each step shaking the floor. Miller's mind raced. They couldn't win this fight head-on. His eyes darted to the central console, an idea forming. "Suppressing fire," he ordered. "Keep him busy." Chen and Rodriguez poured everything they had at Mizar. The alien's shields flared under the assault, but held firm. Miller sprinted for the console, plasma bolts sizzling past his ears. His fingers flew across the alien interface, muscle memory from countless simulations kicking in. He found the termination sequence for the cloning arrays and slammed his palm down on the activation panel. A bone-chilling howl erupted from Mizar. The alien staggered, clutching his head. In the surrounding chambers, Miller saw the incubation pods flicker and go dark. "No!" Mizar roared, his voice distorted with rage and pain. "My children!" The warlord's cybernetic implants pulsed with fury. His arm reconfigured, forming a vicious energy blade. He lunged at Miller with inhuman speed. Miller barely managed to roll away, feeling the heat of the blade as it missed him by inches. He came up firing, his pistol's rounds pinging uselessly off Mizar's armored hide. "Commander!" Chen shouted, tossing Miller a pulse grenade. Miller caught it one-handed, priming the device. He hurled it at Mizar's feet, diving for cover as the blast rocked the control room. When the smoke cleared, Mizar stood unharmed, his shields crackling. The alien's cybernetic eye glowed with murderous intent. Miller's gaze fell on the security lockdown controls. A desperate plan formed. "Everyone out!" he ordered. "Now!" Chen and Rodriguez hesitated for a split second, then sprinted for the exit. Miller hit his fist on the lockdown panel. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing him in with the enraged Mizar. "Just you and me now," Miller growled, raising his pistol. Mizar's energy blade crackled. "You will suffer for this, human." The control room shook as explosions ripped through the facility. Alarms blared, warning of critical system failures. Miller ducked under Mizar's first swing, feeling the alien's blade slice through the air above him. He drove his fist into Mizar's abdomen, pain lancing up his arm as he struck unyielding metal. Mizar's cybernetic hand clamped around Miller's throat, lifting him off his feet. The commander gasped for air, spots dancing in his vision. His fingers scrabbled at his belt, finding his combat knife. With the last of his strength, Miller plunged the blade into a gap in Mizar's armor, right where the cybernetics met flesh. The alien roared in pain, his grip loosening. Miller dropped to the floor, gulping in precious air. He scrambled away as Mizar tore the knife free, tossing it aside. The human's eyes locked onto a critical flaw in Mizar's design, an exposed power coupling where the alien's organic and mechanical components merged. Miller raised his M1911, taking careful aim. Time seemed to slow as he squeezed the trigger. The pistol's report was deafening in the confined space. The armor-piercing round struck true. Mizar's cybernetic system sparked and sputtered. The alien staggered, momentarily stunned. Miller seized his chance. He lunged for the reactor controls, initiating the final detonation sequence. Klaxons wailed as the countdown began. A massive explosion rocked the facility. The floor beneath Miller's feet buckled and split. He found himself teetering on the edge of a yawning chasm, the bowels of the dying facility revealed below. Mizar, his systems rebooting, lumbered towards Miller. The human commander looked at the gap, judging the distance. It was a long jump, maybe too long. Miller ran, pushing off with every ounce of strength he had left. For a heart-stopping moment, he was airborne, the abyss below him. His hands grasped the far edge. Muscles straining, he pulled himself up, rolling away from the chasm's edge. Behind him, Mizar howled in impotent rage as the facility began to implode. Miller sprinted down twisting corridors, the thunder of collapsing metal chasing him. He burst out into the open air, lungs burning. A blinding flash erupted behind him as the reactor finally detonated. The shockwave hurled Miller forward, and then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, familiar faces swam into view. Chen, Rodriguez, the survivors. "You made it, sir," Chen said, helping Miller to his feet. Miller nodded, his whole body aching. As his team began to move out, Miller cast one last look at the smoking crater that had been Mizar's facility. They had won, but at what cost? And what other horrors awaited them in the vastness of space? Miller squared his shoulders and turned away. Whatever came next, they would face it, together. Oh! Miller's boots pounded against the metal grating as he sprinted through the twisting corridors of the Zyrax facility. His lungs burned with each ragged breath, but he pressed on. The central cloning control hub loomed ahead, its massive doors emblazoned with alien glyphs. He skidded to a halt before the control panel, his fingers flying over the alien interface. The doors hissed open, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with pulsing biomechanical equipment. Rows of holographic displays flickered with streams of data, Mizar's engrams uploading into the system. Miller's eyes widened as he realized the gravity of the situation. If that upload completed, they'd face an army of Mizar clones, each more terrifying than the last. "Not on my watch," he growled, raising his trusty M1911. The pistol's report echoed through the chamber as Miller unloaded on the control consoles. Sparks flew as the armor-piercing rounds tore through delicate circuitry. Alarms blared, their wailing piercing Miller's ears. Zyrax scientists scrambled to abort the overload, their scaled hands frantically working auxiliary controls. Miller pivoted, his pistol barking again and again. The alien researchers fell, green blood pooling on the floor. Through the observation windows, Miller saw explosions rippling through the cloning chambers. His remaining squad members, Chen and Rodriguez, fought desperately against a tide of half-formed monstrosities clawing their way from ruptured vats. Miller's fingers danced across the reactor controls, initiating the self-destruct sequence. A computerized voice announced, "Warning, geothermal reactor critical. Detonation in 10 minutes. He turned to make his escape, but froze as a nightmarish figure burst from a nearby cloning tank. The creature before him defied description, a writhing mass of Zyrax flesh fused with gleaming cybernetics. A cluster of eyes, both organic and mechanical, fixed on Miller with predatory focus. "Open fire!" Miller bellowed. Chen and Rodriguez unleashed a hail of pulse rifle fire, but the monstrosity shrugged off the barrage. It lashed out with whip-like tendrils, skewering two of Miller's men before they could react. "Fall back!" Miller ordered, his voice hoarse. "Get to the extraction point. I'll hold it off." Chen hesitated, but Miller's glare brooked no argument. As his team retreated, Miller sprinted deeper into the facility, drawing the abomination's attention. He ducked into a side chamber, the creature's heavy footsteps echoing behind him. Miller spun, emptying his magazine into the beast's eye cluster. It roared in pain, but the damage only seemed to enrage it further. Miller's hands shook as he slammed his last clip home. The facility rumbled ominously around him as the reactor reached critical mass. He raised the pistol one final time, locking eyes with the monstrosity. In that moment he saw it, a flash of cold intelligence, the unmistakable malice of Mizar himself staring back at him from within the abomination's twisted form. "This ends here," Miller snarled, squeezing the trigger. The world exploded in blinding light and searing heat. The cloning facility vanished in a cataclysmic fireball, taking Miller and the bio-cyborg horror with it. Hours later, Chen stood at the edge of the still-smoking crater. He knelt, brushing aside debris to reveal a twisted piece of metal, the charred remains of Miller's M1911.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.